In this part of painting the battlescape, we're going to be starting on the rocks and trees. The base color for the rocks is going to be a Badger Air color called Weathered Black, which is actually a very dark gray, very similar to Adeptus Battle Gray or Vallejo German Gray. And so all we're going to do is just go over the rocks real quick with the airbrush and paint them the base color. And we have to make sure we get all the rocks throughout the entire piece. And there's a lot of them here and there scattered. Unfortunately, most of these are going to have to get redone with a brush after the ground color is put on. And I also want to apologize for the bad framing here. There's a lot of it in this video, but it's not very interesting either. I'm just base coating the rocks. It's really actually kind of hard to see in this video the difference between the gray and the black, but that's probably from overexposing on the light, which I need to be able to see the airbrush. But the rocks have a very nice gray color. We're just going over here and making sure we got every little detail with sufficient color before we move on to the highlighting. Okay, and the next step, when the first layer of highlights on the rocks, we're going to use a color called camouflage gray, which is basically a off-white, kind of like a linen or something similar. Usually I've been using a pure white, but I wanted to try something a little different this time. See if it could come out with a better or worse effect, just to kind of experiment here. So what we're going to do is the first highlight's going to be a 50-50 mix of the camouflage gray and the weathered black, which I'm mixing up here, and I'm going to put it, when it's done mixing, of course, I'll put it in the airbrush. So in this part I hope to get a little better framing. Yep, here we go. And so what we do is we're just going to take the airbrush and we're going to take the first highlight and we're just going to go around the edges of every single individual stone on the piece and just give each piece a highlight, especially around the rim of the crater. It may sound rather tedious, but in reality it's not. In fact, the entire step took me about 7 minutes from the video recorded, which has been really edited down, but real world time, once I grabbed the airbrush, had the mix right, it was about 7 minutes. You might see me fits in with the valve underneath the cup. That's called the micro air control valve, and I probably should have cut the pressure down on the regulator itself, but instead I just fiddled with the micro valve to get the right spray consistency for the amount of detail I'm getting here. You see, it doesn't take long for each stone to kind of come out real quick with this. So that pretty much finishes up the second, or I should say the first highlight on the rocks. So we're going to clean out the airbrush, go on to the next highlight. Okay, for the second or final highlight on the rocks, I'm going to be using the pure camo gray, and I'm going to be going along just the edges of each rock, especially the high edges around each crater rim. That's where I'm really looking forward to getting. And of course, it's going to be a much smaller highlight than the previous layer. But again, there's so many rocks on here. Again, it sounds tedious, but in reality, it's just not. The airbrush just makes this a really easy project to do. Okay, so that finishes up for the rocks. For the trees, we're just going to use a weathering color called grimy black. Grimy black is actually a pretty common weathering color, which you should easily find any place that you can buy model train parts and kits and things. It's a pretty common color. In this case, I am using the grimy black from the Badger ModelFlex line. So all I'm going to do is this is just a base coat. I'm going to paint the trees a grimy black, and then I'm going to go over on the base all the wood areas and paint those with the same color, trying to avoid getting any paint on the stones, which actually isn't very hard to do at all. Again, sorry for the bad framing. So, I'm just going to finish up the trees real quick and move on to the final step of this part. And now that the grimy black has dried, we're going to just go over the trees with a quick dry brush. I've hit a couple spots with the bestial brown. I actually started dry brushing before I hit record, so the brown part's already done. I just did some small areas here and there. I'm going to use the same camouflage gray color on the trees with a dry brush. And that's really all they need to give a nice aged, withered tree look. So that's it with the trees, and that'll be it for part 4, and still pics to follow.